Hi there, this is Ezekiel Dasho, and continuing this series in shiny, rather symmetrical objects. Today I'm going to draw a shallow dish with some water in it. And before I get started, I wanted to quick go over, especially for beginners, the pathway to drawing a better circle. So just to quick demonstrate the way that we sort of pick up a pencil with, most people would just pick it up and use it like they were writing. And if you asked them to draw a circle, they would maybe give you something that looked like this. And you can just see it's not very round. It's one solid line I've kind of pushed in sort of the whole time. What I'm going to recommend is that you hold your wrist straight and you use your elbow and your shoulder for this motion. And so you can get a nice circular motion. And using your sort of body as in a more mechanical way rather than trying to use your wrist the whole time, you get these shapes that will look much more circular to the eye than something like this. The average, some within this shape, maybe no one of these circles is perfect, but as you lightly go over it, you will get a shape that is much more circular looking. Okay, so I don't want to belabor that point too much, but I think that this is a great warm-up, just drawing circles like this and just keeping your wrists straight. And it's going to come in particularly useful when we look at drawing this dish. And you'll see here. So, basically, it's just a bunch of circles. There's this one on the outside. There are a couple on the lip here. There's this circle made by the line of the water, and that is a little bit offset from the center. And then beyond that, it's a matter of shading. And, there's this shadow that comes and extends down here, and a little bit more shadow there. So I'm not going to spend too much time making this extremely realistic. I think it would be a useful exercise no matter what type of pencil you're using. I'm going to start with drawing a big circle and drawing it in very lightly. This is similar to building the block, or rather the cube that we drew, and similar to many of the other shapes. Pretty much just the idea, the process is almost the exact same, and it's just getting the general shape in and then building on top of that as we go. So we've got this nice circle here, and we can get started. The shadowing from the circle is almost done most of the work for us. We can start identifying where the water is going to sit in the dish, and then potentially build out a little more from the circle, that build it out farther from the center. But we'll see how it starts to look. And then well, definitely I want to do this part of the shading as lightly as I can, just so that I've got some freedom to adjust it later. And I'm using a softer pencil today. So I've got to use a very light touch, otherwise I'm going to get these very dark lines very quickly. And that's fine. Just something to be aware of if you're using a 2B or a 4B or something even softer. For the absolute beginner, especially if you have one of those handy dandy pencil sets, I would recommend doing the first layer of this drawing, the first sketch of it, if you will, in a lighter pencil, like a harder pencil, like even a 2H. Because then you'll be able to work your drawing up, get it to the point where you're happy with how it looks. It's just very light, and then start darkening it up using progressively darker pencils. So you could then, go to an H and a B and then a 2B. And that will allow you to almost trace over your own drawing. So like when you start to get to the point where you want to really commit to your own, or to the shadows, for instance, say there's a, say that you want to do this absolutely photorealistically accurate, and you want to get the rim just right, freehand, and no, obviously the whole thing is in freehand. So you might want to sketch that out with a harder lead, and then and then shade over it with a darker lead in the places that need it. And that's probably what I would do if I were doing this just at home, or for a portrait or a still life or something that I was just doing for one of my own art projects. But since I'm doing this for video, I wanted to use a softer lead, and it'll pick up on the camera a little better, and it'll make the process go a little faster. It'll be a little rougher and a little darker. You can really get some clean, crisp, precise lines and forms using the method of starting with a harder pencil and working your way softer. But it's also more time consuming, and these videos, there's a little bit of a, you want to be time sensitive. People have a little time to watch a video, but not necessarily 2 hours or whatever. And shading is so fun that you can easily lose yourself in it, and before you know it, it's an hour later, 2 hours later, and you've got a beautiful piece of art. I think this drawing objects like this is, it's not necessarily the most interesting object. Like, it's not a face or something like that. But man, I do find that when I go to draw a face later, or something a little more complex and interesting, like hands or flowers or something like that, faces, especially with eyes, exercises like these will really help, because they help train your instincts and for seeing light and shadow, reflectivity, if that's a word, reflectiveness. And they help obviously with hand control. There's a lot of hand control that goes into making an object freehand that's spherical or that's circular. And all these things are very, very helpful when you're drawing more complex objects. So the rim is varying darknesses. The edge of the dish is varying darknesses. And without going on and on too much, I could just start darkening those a little bit more. I don't want to have it completely uniform darkness throughout. There are places on the edge of the dish that are much lighter. And for instance, this area here where it's closer to the water gets to be quite a bit darker than the water itself. There are times where, I would recommend just turning the page, or rotating the paper a little bit, so that you could shade it. It will feel more natural with the curve of your hand and your arm. I'm just leaving it still for the purposes of the video so that it's not making people dizzy watching this thing rotate around real fast. Go very lightly over here just to kind of bring out the highlights a little bit. And same here, there's some sort of highlights on the rim, so I can kind of press in a little bit there to suggest that. And so quickly, there are some shadows in the water here, or some highlights rather. So I'm going to very lightly kind of put little boundaries around where those highlights will be. And then, let's see, I've got a couple more here. And then there's almost this line of shadow that crosses here. Not quite a straight line, it curves a little bit with the dish. And then, so you can lightly shade that. And then it looks like it's a little darker even closer to this way. So very similar to the process in the other pictures, it's just a matter of we built the shape and now we're going to identify the darker areas and start darkening those. Giving the darks some extra dark. And definitely the darkness is your friend because it accentuates the highlights, and that everything we see, it's just by the light in terms of lightness and darkness is by contrast. So if you want a spot, if I want this spot here to start to shine out a little more, darkening the area around it will make that happen. And so got a little bit of shine there, and a little bit right there too, and maybe a little bit right there. So now this part you do want to be kind of careful. Say you're going in and you're gently shading, or we're gently shading the water, the surface of the water. But I want to be very respectful of these boundaries here, because if you cross over those boundaries with the shading, it's going to sort of muddle the quality of the reflectiveness and sort of, it's going to tamper with the quality of the illusion that you're creating with so I'm using the basically the lightest touch I can. I'm not pushing down on the pencil at all for this. I'm just letting it drag along. And then for this part here, where I want it to be a little darker, I start by dragging it along, and then I gently start pushing in to see how much extra depth that's going to give me before I really commit to it, and then start covering the area. And again, close to the edge of the water, there's this very, very fine reflective edge to the border. Now on this side of the dish here, I've got a relatively dark line, and in real life it's pretty light, but I think the way that it will solve that is by drawing in the shadow. And so the shadow, let's see, comes in about here. And there's another one sort of here. And I drew those with actual lines almost, really for the sake of the demonstration. I think I should probably just shade them in. So what I'll do now is I'll shade in the first one so you can kind of see. And we'll just do it kind of old school cross hatching. I've done the one layer, and now I'm going to quick hit the borders a little bit so it's defined, because what I'm seeing is that they are actually a little bit defined here. And then, so we did the one way, and now I want to go perpendicular. And then between that would maybe be vertical. So I'll leave that for now, and then start with this shadow here. It's not quite round. It's maybe a little rounder than I have it here. And it definitely extends into here. So let's start with this way here, just choosing the shortest route across this thing. And then let's go ahead and go perpendicular to that. And I am covering the darker area that I already did, because that is even darker than either one of these shadows individually. With their darknesses combined, it's even darker. So that would be the third round of cross-hatching, I think, and then might as well throw on a fourth. With cross-hatching, you can just keep going and looking for, directions that you haven't gone yet. After a while, it won't look like cross-hatching anymore. It'll just look like shading. And that's kind of what I want. I don't really want it to look like a, like a woven blanket or anything like that. I just wanted to get the lead on the paper. And then after that happens, then, you can smooth it out. And this area is even darker, so I can go back in with some little circles and now this gives us the darkness that we need to define the rim of the glass in lights rather than darks. So let's go ahead and just darken that up a bit. And then you'll see here on the edge of the cup, or the dish, if we darken that up, it'll bring the lights of the and then it does really become this continuing process of going through your picture and going back over the source material and looking and seeing, oh, this spot, could use some extra darkness, or maybe this spot needs to be more well defined, or this spot would look shinier if I added a little more shadowing into it. Things like that. I think for the sake of this video, I'm going to call that one pretty much done. Just a little bit of shading on the way out here. And I hope that this was useful to you out there, dear viewer or viewers. And we will definitely be back with more as we build up on our path to drawing more complex things like animals and faces and the fun stuff. I'll go over this area so it doesn't look so linear. And then highlight this area here by drawing, getting the some of the shadow in there. Well, I think that pretty much does it. Sorry, I'm droning on a little bit, but if you're still with me, just wanted to say I hope hope this worked for you, and I think we sort of encapsulated the feel of this water dish without harping exactly on about the photo accuracy of everything. And it's definitely great exercise. So, all right. Be well, everyone.